Welcome back. This time I would like to make a preliminary assessment on the consequences of Israel's strike on Iran. Number one, the effect, the possibility of a contamination crisis. The International Atomic Energy Agency has been very clear. In their own words, Iran's nuclear facilities must never be attacked. Those are their words, must never be attacked. This is nothing new. Similar warnings were issued when Putin attacked the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. And what's the tragic precedent? Chernobyl. The risk of contamination is too high to be taken lightly. Yet, that's precisely what Netanyahu has done. The effect of the attack on this end should be known in the next days. Yet, this issue has received less attention from the media than the Iranian retaliation against Netanyahu's villa. And the matter is that the attacks on these nuclear sites continue. Uh, and unfortunately, we don't have the International Atomic Energy Agency on the ground to assess the possibility of contamination, what is very worrisome because just take into account this. Netanyahu has launched an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, knowing well that he cannot reach sites like Fordo, for instance, and that he cannot reach those sites, even if he had the weaponry, that he cannot reach those sites in one attack, in only one attack. That these attacks are going to last probably weeks. So this is a huge irresponsibility that unfortunately is not mentioned by the media. Number two, even if no side effects in terms of contamination happen, because there were, for any reason, there were constrained to a limited area, do we have any reason to believe that these attacks will stop Iran's nuclear aspirations? No. Iran already has the know-how, and Russia can provide it with uranium through the same mechanisms used to evade sanctions on Russia. Besides, this is not the first time the United States has killed military leaders like Soleimani and Iranian scientists, and that has not slowed down the process. Iran has reached this point with its nuclear project precisely because they have developed resilience to American attempts at stopping their program. Worse, the best way to prevent their uranium enrichment from reaching dangerous levels was the nuclear deal, which is pretty much dead in the foreseeable future since Iran will hardly trust Trump again. And of course, Pezeskian, who was our best card, has been severely weakened. So, do I see a nuclear deal coming after the attack? Hardly. We would have to probably, if Europe and China take a more active approach in terms of brokering a deal alternative to Trump, who has shown no much seriousness on this end. Number three, Netanyahu's call to regime change will only add to the significant damage inflicted on Iranian moderates. In his first administration, Trump undermined Rouhani, the Iranian president who signed the nuclear deal with Obama. Rouhani was moderate by Iranian standards, and that was what made the deal possible. But yet, when Trump came to power, he undermined Rouhani with sanctions, and as a result, he was weakened and succeeded in the next elections by Raisi, who was as radical as Ahmadinejad, just less bombastic, and with whom a new nuclear deal was impossible. And yet, Biden was blessed by a fatal accident in which Raisi died, and thanks to which Pezeshkian, another moderate for Iranian standards, was elected. Moreover, Pezeshkian himself made calls to the West to negotiate a new nuclear deal. But Biden was too committed to turn his pal Bibi into Julius Caesar and dismiss Pezeshkian. Then Trump came back in his second administration, and it seems he really wanted, and at first at least it seems he really wanted a new nuclear deal, but lacked the courage to split with Netanyahu. Result, the moderate Pezeshkian has been undermined as Rouhani was during his first administration, during the Trump's first administration, and Khamenei, the radical Ayatollah, has been strengthened with Netanyahu's threat on his life. And with Khamenei, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards have also been strengthened, what makes the scenario much more difficult, because even if Khamenei went soft and wanted to make extraordinary concessions to get peace at any cost, the Revolutionary Guards are not going to allow it. Number four, because Trump has not been able to split with Netanyahu and wars has jumped on the bandwagon of Netanyahu's consummated attack by protecting Israel from Iranian attacks and threatening Iran, Americans especially the Americans in bases in the Middle East, especially in Iraq, are under threat, are exposed to retaliation by Iranian proxies, by Shia proxies in general, which would give Trump his own Tonkin Gulf episode. Tonkin, remember, was the excuse used by Johnson to go to escalate the Vietnam War, that we know all now was actually caused by American provocations. Was a real attack, yes, but caused by American provocations. And so the question is why we are putting American troops as sitting ducks exposed to attacks by Iranian proxies, unless, of course, what we want is an excuse, an attack precisely on American troops, just to have a Gulf of Tonkin episode. Number five, had Israel been attacked as in previous wars with Egypt and Syria, I'd be the first one to call for solidarity with Israel, even if its president is Netanyahu. But this war benefits only Netanyahu's coalition and gives Netanyahu the excuse to undermine even more Israel's democracy. Netanyahu has been warning about Iran being weeks away from a bomb since at least 1996. In 1995, he said that Iran was 3 years from getting a bomb. In 1996, that it was just weeks away. Then in several other episodes, including 2012 and 2015, again that Iran was could get a nuclear bomb anytime. That was just a matter of weeks. Those weeks should have been extremely long for that assessment to make sense. And yet, despite all the times Netanyahu has come with the same tale, we have given him credibility and not questioned him uh, even after the many times his assessment has been proved to be ridiculous. Even in this last time, the Pentagon said that for Iran to get the bomb, it could take him at least a year, most probably three, as reported by CNN. And yet, we still are acting as if Netanyahu's claims had been validated by the facts. Number six, the effects, the full effects on the markets are still unknown. Supposedly, Netanyahu was not going to strike Iran's oil facilities, and yet he has done precisely that. His goal is clearly to drag the USA into a war with Iran, which would be a much worse scenario than Iraq 2.0. In the worst case scenario, Netanyahu could strike the Karg island, which is the Iranian oil terminal through which 90% of Iranian oil flows. If so, in the best case, Iran could block the Strait of Hormuz used by most oil tankers. Let's remember that about 20 to 25% of the oil crosses through the Strait of Hormuz. Just mining or sinking ships in the strait would be enough to take the global economy into a recession. In the worst case scenario, Iran would attack, of course, Saudi Arabia oil facilities, which would cause a much more severe recession. The main casualties of those of that economic tragedy would be Europe, who we need that which we need strong enough to stand up to Putin, and China, which is still struggling with deflation and trying to avoid a military way out. Number seven, Democrats are expected to keep playing that because they don't want, either because they don't want to hurt Biden's feelings or because whatever their priorities are, which are definitely not the priorities of the USA in times when the consequences for the world of this incident may be tragic. In other words, the Democratic Party must man up and find its voice and present an alternative to Netanyahu's and Trump's warmonger options. what this alternative should look like the Obama's nuclear deal. Um, in this case, they have to appeal precisely to the interests of the two parties that would be the most affected if this conflict uh, turns for the wars, which are Europe and China. Are they doing that? No. And that means that with their silence, they are either validating the Biden's failed Middle East policies or Trump's new pro-Putin and pro-Netanyahu policies. And so it's up to them, but unless they prove to be worthy, nobody is going to take them seriously as a counterpart in 2029 in case they come back to power. And precisely the idea is that we can get back to a better normal, not Biden's normal, but to a better counterpart, to being a better counterpart in international affairs, especially when we have a rich legacy we should be aiming to revive, that is the rules-based order created by FDR in 1944-45 in Yalta. Finally, who are the winners of the way this conflict has been handled? Number one, Putin, who will use the crisis to elevate his standing in the yuan zone by helping Iran, will benefit from higher oil prices to continue his war against Ukraine, and in general his hybrid war against the West, and also will benefit from the global attention turning away from Ukraine. Besides the fiscal effects on Europe economies of both the Israeli attack and Trump's tariffs will make it more difficult for Europe to stay the course set by Frederick Merz to overhaul its inefficient and fragmented defense system. And second, Netanyahu, who probably will recover, close the gap with Naftali Bennett as the Iranian retaliation takes a toll in Israel. This has not happened so far, but this may happen if Netanyahu ends up with a clear military victory, even though in the political realm that is not so easy to see in the short term. This hurts Israel because, yes, of course, Netanyahu counts with American weaponry and probably with Trump's military support to get easy military victories in conventional terms. But remember that in 2003, we also got easy victories against the Iraqis. Well, that was not the end of the war. That was actually the start of the war. That was the end of the conventional part, and that was the start of the most bloody and costly part of the war, that was the non-conventional war. And having said that, let me leave you with our newscast.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news,
1. New 266 executive decisions were released in the Oval Office during the weekend. Among them, A. Military parades will take place every year to commemorate President Trump's birthday. Attendance will be mandatory for all federal government employees, who at the end of the event will sing to him, "Happy Birthday." It makes no sense to have a $45 million military parade if people are not going to attend, clarified the president. B. It will be forbidden for the Chief of Staff Susie Wiles to shed tears at public events where she is present with President Trump. She will be happy at all times knowing what the honor of serving President Trump will do for her career. She knows I won't accept her resignation. Who is going to fill her position if she leaves? No. And I don't care about her argument that her grandchildren have cut all ties with her. The nation, that is, me, should be more important to her, added the president. C. Besides July 4th, on December 25th, there will also be ceremonies commemorating the leadership of Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, and Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary, because they are President Trump's heroes. Asked about this executive decision just months after the two dictators replaced the faces of Washington, Roosevelt, and Lincoln in Mount Rushmore, Minority Leader Schumer declared that he would send President Trump another strong letter, but that he was glad to humbly obey the president's wishes in the name of bipartisanship. 2. State Secretary Rubio was called back to Washington from the Maldives but only briefly, for the time it took to embarrass himself with contradictory declarations about Iran. As instructed by the White House, he declared that the United States had not been involved in the Israeli attack on Iran's targets, only to contradict himself soon after declaring that the United States had provided Netanyahu with intelligence and logistics support. And all before President Trump declared that there had been coordination and that he demanded nothing less than Ayatollah Khamenei's unconditional surrender while Secretary Rubio was in his way back to the Maldives. Asked about why he had instructed Secretary Rubio to declare contradictory statements just before invalidating them with new statements, President Trump said, suppressing a laugh, "I can't help myself. From time to time, I like calling Secretary Little Marco to make a fool of himself, and then I send him back to the Maldives without even permission to visit Florida, as he keeps asking. It's also fun to see how he gets upset when I call him Secretary Little Marco, but doesn't dare to talk back. Probably I should hire Lying Ted too, for the times I get bored of Little Marco. I don't know," concluded the president. 3. Blowback on Iowa U.S. Senator Joni Ernst's Medicaid remark celebrated by MAGA base after clarification. She meant illegal aliens, not citizens, would die. Iowa's junior Senator Joni Ernst's remark, "We all are going to die," with which she answered her constituents' complaints about cuts to Medicaid in Trump's Big Beautiful Bill, was cheered by the MAGA base as soon as she clarified that those who were going to die were illegal aliens. And maybe some Democrats but not patriots. As soon as the clarification was known, the initial backlash disappeared, and she even rose 3 points in the more recent polls. "I'm sorry I misspoke. I meant illegals ain't real Christians and patriots, that them and only them dying because of Medicaid cuts is not a sin, and that President Trump's promised me only them will die. And you see how the Lord has rewarded me with a boost at the polls," declared the senator.
This has been the news of this hour. Sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.